Good morning, everybody. It's great to welcome you to this Scaling for Success webinar this morning. Before I do the introductions and the speakers start, just some housekeeping, if I may. Firstly, for all participants, please note that your mic and video will be muted throughout. The webinar is being recorded. We're very keen to take questions, so please do use the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and try and use the Q&A part, not the chat part. And we have time allocated at the end after the speakers to go through those questions. Equally, if during the webinar you feel you have some technical issues, something's not working, and we might be able to fix that for you, drop that in there too. Let's kick off properly then. So before I give the introductions to our main speakers today, I'd like to hand you over to Kim Ball. Kim is co-founder and CEO of the Nordic Start-up Awards, co-founder and CEO of XO.com, and owner of Drone Media. Kim, over to you.
Thank you very much. And yeah, the reason I'm here today is because we work closely with Goodwille. And as you can see, it's actually the Global Startup Awards, but we are in 10 regions now, but everything is very tightly connected to the Nordic. And everything started actually when I attended my first startup weekend, and I think it's around 8 years ago now. And back then I didn't know about the startup ecosystem, but I was freelancing and I knew that I wanted to have my own company, but I was not part of a community. And I remember when I went into that startup weekend, it was like being introduced to a world that I didn't know. And this energy from this community kind of pointed me in another direction. And that's in very short how we started the Nordic Startup Awards, to kind of create our own platform. And we have like 3 things that we work with. So first of all, we get a really good understanding what's going on in the different ecosystems around the world, in Africa, in Southeast Asia, in the Nordic as well. But we also get involved with amazing people. So we have all the finalists, we have the jury members, we have the partners like Goodwille, we work with governments, we work with corporates. So we're building a very, very strong qualitative network. And our mission in life is to actually use this to connect the dots across countries and regions. And I think Goodwille is a really good example of these kind of partnerships, because it's around the Nordic region. And what they're doing is very valuable for the companies that are looking to expand into new markets. Sometimes they know that they want to go to the UK market. Sometimes they don't, and can be, educated to see if it's a good market. But Goodwille has been around for a long time. They know what they're doing. And I think Pleo, which is also a winner of Nordic Startup Awards from the Nordic region, now competing on a global level, is a good example of a success story of a company that goes into the UK market with the help from Goodwille. And one thing that I have learned from the past many years working in this cross-regional startup world is that it's very complicated to enter a new market. So you definitely need help, and each market is different. So every time you go into a new market, you need help from someone. And the UK market is an interesting market, and I think that's why we are connected with Goodwille. So we can also help the Nordic companies that are interested in the UK market to have the best chance possible to succeed. And we have a new season of Nordic Startup Awards, and it's all going to go down, not in a big theater as normal because of the COVID. We decided back in March to keep it online. So we are planning to do a very nice TV show where we announce the winners, and we have hired a journalist, a TV journalist from the Danish broadcasting agency. He's going to host the whole show, and we invite a lot of interesting people into the studio and have invested a lot of resources in some cool videos, and hopefully we can make it a very good experience online. So the good part about COVID is that it also pushes the innovation. So you have to be creative and innovative to operate in the new conditions, and I think that's actually exciting. But we also look forward to have physical meetings again. And I think that was it for me. I'm looking forward to hear more about the rest of the program today.
Thanks, Kim. I know from Goodwille's perspective, it's been great to be working quite close with you guys over the past 3, 4, 5 years or so now. And I also recall, I think last year you talked about maybe changing the venue for this year's awards finals. I don't think you quite realised how extremely you would be changing the venue, given the way we're working now. So if I can just move forward, introduce the speakers that we have today. First of all, myself, I'm Kevin Rutter. I am CFO at Goodwille. By profession, I'm a chartered accountant. And prior to joining Goodwille 5 or so years ago, I had many years working with fast growth services businesses. I hope to give you a brief overview today of what Goodwill's offering is, the sort of people we partner with, an overview of the UK market, some timeframes broadly about setting up in the UK, some top tips picked up from the experiences that we've gone through with many of our clients over the years. Secondly, we have Jackie Brown. Jackie heads up the HR team at Goodwille. She's actually been with the business for 5 or so years, the same as myself. And she and her team have supported many, many businesses on their journey around the whole space of people and HR matters and all that goes with that, with a growing business moving to and expanding into a new territory. And finally, I'm really pleased that we've got from Pleo, as Kim said, Pleo won Startup of the Year last year. We have Owen Aliahan, who is the sales director at Pleo. He has 7 or so years experience of selling SaaS into the UK markets. Prior to joining Pleo, he worked for Dropbox as head of their enterprise sales, originally from Ireland and now based in London. So I think I certainly am. I hope you're looking forward to hearing his story and the story and journey of Pleo, who were a great success so far. So if we now move on to what Goodwille do, Kim very kindly touched on the help that we can give businesses and have done for many years. So our story is that for over 20 years now, actually, with a primary focus very much on the Nordic region, we have helped hundreds of businesses, advise them on timing of how and when to move, a range of services to get them moved, and then support them thereafter for as long as they need us once they move to the UK market. We have very strong ties culturally to the Nordic region, and we understand the pain and the challenges that go with moving to a new territory, particularly the UK in this context. In terms of the services that Goodwille offer, there are 5 services at its core. Firstly, corporate governance, which is all about filings, regulatory matters, compliance, agreements, that sort of thing. Finance, which is anything and everything from year-end support to periodic support, for example, dealing with VAT returns and submissions on a quarterly basis. But at its heart and where it works best is where we operate as a fully outsourced finance service, staying very close to the business, day to day, week to week, month to month, dealing with all the transactional stuff, but also critically key management information, ensuring that reporting is dealt with to parent company when need be, and so on. Human resources, I've already introduced Jackie. Jackie and her team look after the full employee life cycle and all that goes with that. Payroll, fairly obvious, but really important clearly that our clients' employees are paid properly in a compliant way, and all of that is dealt with in a controlled manner. And finally, virtual offices. All of that wrapped up together, and this is a really important point, I think, means that businesses like yourselves and like most of our clients can really focus on what they are good at, developing their ideas, developing their product, winning their first contracts, knowing that in the background, these non-core areas are being dealt with properly in a UK compliant manner, and someone has got your back, if you like, in that area, because that can be a huge detraction, and I'll touch on that again towards the end of my little presentation here. In terms of people we've worked with, the next slide shows a small number of very important clients from the Nordic region in the tech space who we have, and indeed in most cases still do work with, and there is Pleo again, right there in the center, but some big names there, some really interesting businesses, and it's been a real pleasure to support those over the last few years. Partnerships, and Kim touched on 2 things actually in his little introduction there, which I think are really important. One is collaboration and partnerships, work with people, talk to a lot of people, seek help. That's really important. In terms of Goodwille, we partner with lots of different organizations. There are a handful on the screen there. So we're very close to all the Nordic Chambers of Commerce. We have in many cases representation on their council or committees. The OOP project out of Norway is really good at developing tech businesses and tech talents and helping them on their journey to expand into the UK and indeed other markets. And of course, the Nordic Start-up Awards, which we know already quite a lot about. So moving forward from there, why the UK? Some of this is quite obvious, I know, but still I think important to run through. The UK is, from a Nordic perspective, geographically on the doorstep, and in terms of its own geography, has a large population and a relatively compact space, so a great market. A very well-versed and experienced business-friendly climate, lots of different things have been developed over many years. We know how to do business. In terms of talent, some of the best universities in Europe and indeed the world are in the UK. Not just the well-known ones though, and not London-centric, which is often what people think. Across the whole of the UK, there are some great universities producing a great pool of talents, particularly now in the tech space. E-commerce, the consumer in the UK is very well versed in e-commerce. It's kind of becoming the norm and growing and growing and growing. Reputationally, the UK has always been for many years and continues to be a world leader in terms of its reputation in many fields. And of course, and it's nice and easy for us Brits to say this, language, we don't have to learn many of the languages because the world business language is English. So 6 key things there which are fairly obvious but actually really important and lend themselves to the UK being in many cases a natural territory for the next step for a Nordic business that's developed its products and or services to a certain point. We have a multicultural society. We understand the Nordics and the Nordic culture, and there's a lot of finance support available in the UK. In terms of what methods there are, if we can jump to the next slide, Hannah, thank you, routes to market for businesses moving to the UK, broadly there are 4. I'll touch on them all very quickly. The first one, which is grayed out, is one which we tend not to really recommend or have many clients that work with, but as I'll make a passing reference to, for businesses that are shipping products, using an agent or distributor model can work. That can bring conflicts because they're probably working for other people too. And also it means that a business is not close to the ground. And I think that's really important. We'll touch on that again shortly. The next way of dealing with getting into a new market is to employ your people directly by the home company from the Nordics. That can and does work, and many of our clients do that, and that's a great way of getting some presence on the ground to test the water further. But it's still not fully being in there, and in that scenario, a business is often not taken as seriously as it will be if you move to the 2 to the right of the screen, which are the 2 main methods that businesses move to as they get more serious on their journey into a new market. 2 things there. I'll start with the one on the right first, branch. So a branch is a presence in the UK. It's a taxable presence in the UK. It can employ people, it can trade, it can VAT register, etc., etc. But critically, a branch from a legal perspective is an extension of the parent company. Why is that relevant? That's relevant because if we compare and contrast that to a limited company is a separate legal entity and is therefore protected in law. If there is an issue, and things can and do go wrong, unfortunately, and things get legal, then protection is given with that legal limited liability wrapper around the limited company. And in terms of setting up a limited company, share capital only needs to be £1 in the UK. It's very easy to set up a limited company in the UK. So what most of our clients do, and certainly what we recommend in nearly all cases, is for 2 reasons really. 1, to be taken seriously, because limited companies are recognised when trying to deal with suppliers, put contracts in place better than branches. And 2, to give that legal protection. Limited company is normally the way to go. The others can be used. In terms of, if we now move to, if I give you an overview of the steps, the timeframes involved in setting up in the UK, clearly these are indicative because every scenario is slightly different. But I think there are some key points that can come from this slide. The first thing, starting from left to right, excuse me, is that opening a bank account, which can be very important to trade over here, can and often is a time-consuming and challenging process. The whole anti-money laundering and know your client regime that the banks have to go through is become ever more challenging. Banks are often saying no to new businesses. It can take a long time. The good news is that Goodwille can and do help with the administration of that. We are well contacted with a number of banks and can try to help open doors, but it is a challenge. So I think any business who is seriously thinking about moving to the UK, one of the first things to do is to get the ball rolling in that area. The key thing around that is leverage off any existing relationships that you may already have in your home country. If they have a presence either directly or via a partner in the UK, that is often the solution. The next thing that Goodwille can help with and is key when businesses set up is a basic insurance cover. So things like, for example, employer's liability, mandatory to have in the UK as soon as you start employing people. We can facilitate through our broker connections, simple packages that cover startups when they first move and make sure that there are no risks in that area. VAT registration. VAT registration is mandatory once VAT-able sales in the UK reach the threshold of £85,000. However, for many businesses, it makes sense to voluntarily register before that limit is reached, very simply because that allows the business to recoup VAT charged on costs coming in, and therefore that 20% additional tax is not a hit to the P&L account. That process can take between 4 and 6 weeks, depending on scale and complexity of the business, but is relatively straightforward. Accounting process, so in terms of the finance offering, depends on the complexity, but really it's no more than just agreeing what sort of reporting structure you want in terms of your management information, frequency, complexity, other plugin systems that you may need, for example, Pleo, if you want to use that to deal with expenses and reimbursements and easy ways of your staff spending. Well, we can get that set up and running for businesses in a matter of 1, 2, or 3 days, depending on complexity. Moving to the people side a little bit, contracts of employment. Key point here is the contracts of employment in the UK are typically longer and more complicated than numerous other countries, including some of the Nordic countries. So it's important that those contracts are compliant, and we have seen people, and we still do see people, who will do it themselves, suddenly have a problem downstream, and end up having to spend more money and incur more time to fix it than had they done it in the first place. Other key thing to mention here, and I think Jackie will touch on this when she gets to her HR piece, is workplace pensions are mandatory in the UK. Each employer has to have a workplace pension scheme, and that can take a few weeks to set up. The employees can opt out of the scheme, but the scheme has to be in place. In terms of employment taxes, PAYE registration, PAYE stands for pay as you earn. That is the process by which employees' taxes are calculated, collected, and then remitted to the tax authorities on a monthly basis through the payroll process. Very important to get that set up to not breach any regulations, and quite quick to do too. It's a simple tick box exercise, but critical that happens, and we can do that for all of our clients. And in terms of a UK office as part of the virtual office offering, that's very straightforward. That's just agreeing on processes, where information needs to go, what contact points are. So overall, pretty quick once a decision has been made to get the basics set up and running. Caveat, the bank account is the biggest challenge, and is an important thing to have in place to be a serious business in the UK. We kind of do offer workarounds around that in the short term, whereby certain transactions can run through accounts that we control, but to get up and running properly, the UK bank account is an important thing to have in place. I couldn't give an overview of the UK and our services without touching briefly on Brexit. This is not a Brexit webinar. I will only be touching on these things, but I think three things at a high level. Broadly, 3 things really matter around the Brexit scenario: the movement of people, GDPR, and the movement of personal data and the controls around that. And I know Jackie will, again, be touching on these in a second. I'm simply going to mention for now they exist, so have that awareness. If there are questions, perhaps we can take them even after the webinar. Movement of goods is, I think, going to be a problem in the short term as the paperwork, the administration around importing increases significantly at points of entry. That will dissipate over time, I'm sure. But I know that most of you are in the sort of tech and or service space anyway, so probably not an issue. But worth mentioning that Brexit clearly is coming. The UK, though, is very much open for business. We have a lot of new clients coming to us over the last few months, realising that these things can't get in the way, and it will still work and be a success story. Finally, what I'd like to touch on are 3 high-level top tips from many experiences that as a business we have seen over the years. I think I said earlier that it's really important that people like yourselves, when moving, you need to focus on what you're good at. You're the clever guys in the room. You've got the ideas. Focus on that. Develop that. Win your first contract. Build your connections, and so on and so on. In terms of the support and other specialist areas, let people do that for you. Partner with them, as Kim said. So the first thing is what we hear people say: I don't need help. I can do it myself. People are ambitious. People are driven. People want to get things done. I'm just going to do this. It's a mistake. Something will be missed. And if it's not missed, you don't have time to do it. Focus on what you're good at. Use your expertise, your entrepreneurial drive, and take things forward that way. The next thing that we hear, it's been a tough year. It's not the right market for us. It is tough. It is very tough. It's achievable, and we see businesses doing all the time, but you do need to be tenacious. You do need to not let things get in your way too quickly and not give up. I think a key part of that, we touched on the routes to market earlier, is the most effective routes to market are where you have a presence on the ground. I recommend a limited company with your own people. Know the local market, know the local culture, build the relationships that way. That's really important. But don't give up too soon. Use people to support you, use your networks, and have a local presence with local knowledge. And finally, we're all well connected. There are people that we know and trust who can do lots of different things, and absolutely talk to as many people as possible. Everyone's got a story. Everyone's got an experience that can bring something else to the table. But when it comes to the more formal things, sadly, the UK is becoming ever more litigious. Do things properly. Get those contracts in place. Don't just do it on a handshake. Make sure your commercial contracts are dealt with properly. Make sure your employment contracts are put in place properly. It's really important, and focus on what you are really good at. So that's it from me in terms of overview of what Goodwille do, the UK market, routes to market, and some high-level tips. I'd like now to pass you across to Jackie to talk about people aspects of operating in the UK.
Thanks, Kevin. Morning, everyone. So as Kevin mentioned, I'm the HR manager at Goodwille. Within the Goodwille HR department, we have years of experience of assisting Nordic companies with their HR needs. In summary, and something which Kevin has already mentioned as well, we do deal with the full life cycle of an employee, from recruitment to termination and everything in between. And as a department, we look after the HR administration needs for our clients, as well as providing HR advice and support on personnel issues. When it comes to recruitment, we can help you with hiring local employees in the UK via our recruitment packages. If you are looking to move an employee to the UK from an overseas company in the group on a temporary basis, which is known as a secondment, then we can help you here. And then we can also assist you with arranging your sponsorship license in the UK if you need to hire outside of the existing resident labour market force in the UK. So when hiring in the UK, there are a number of things that you need to be mindful of. There are minimum requirements which you need to meet as a UK employer. So without going into too much detail, employment law differs from country to country. The employees who you hire are protected by the employment law of the country where they are physically working. So if you hire in the UK, then you must comply with UK employment law. There are also bi-yearly changes made to laws and guidelines, which make it important to partner with someone who is up to date with this and who understands what's required. Kevin touched on this earlier, but employment contracts which are compliant with UK employment legislation are an absolute must. You need to issue your UK employers with a written statement of the key terms of employment from their first day of employment at the very latest. Overseas companies are often shocked by the length of the UK employment contracts, as they're much lengthier than what they're used to. This is absolutely normal, and with all of the content which is legally required to be included, it is a necessity. If you think about policies, so it's completely understandable when initially starting up in the UK that you're looking to aim for a lean model. However, when you hire employees, you should at least have some minimal policies in place. So your employees legally need to be clear on your disciplinary and grievance procedures. So we recommend policies to outline this, which of course are compliant with UK law. And once you have 5 employees in place, then you do need a health and safety policy as well. As you grow, we recommend that you think about enhancing your offering and also ensure that you add more policies for your benefit and that of the employees. If you have employees, then you need to put employer's liability insurance in place. And this is cover in case your employee has an accident at work. And this is a UK specific policy. And as Kevin did mention earlier as well, your employees need to be paid. And as such, if your employees are living and working in the UK, then they need to be paid via a UK payroll, where they'll be paying tax and national insurance contributions in the UK. And then you are also paying your employer national insurance contributions. If we think about benefits, for benefits, the only mandatory benefit in the UK is for you to provide a pension scheme, which is compliant with auto-enrolment regulations. So again, this is something which is UK specific. You need to have a company scheme and you must enrol all of your employees into this. You will make employer contributions, which are 3% as a minimum, and your employees' contributions are 5%. And there are also minimum periods and rules for paid statutory absences too, such as annual leave, sick leave, maternity, paternity and shared parental leave, the rules and payments for which are too lengthy to go into in this session, but of course we'd be happy to assist you with this. If we can just move to the next slide, please. So with all of the eye-catching headlines recently on the pandemic and the US elections, perhaps Brexit has not been at the forefront of your mind. However, at the end of the transition period is approaching on the 31st of December of this year. So the main people areas which will be affected by Brexit are freedom of movement, government and sponsorships, and data protection. Excuse me. So GDPR is a huge topic, and this is not the best place to delve into the detail now, but data protection rules will be affected by Brexit. So for your information, as well as complying with EU GDPR, which you will be currently, if as a company you are processing personal data for data subjects in the UK, so that could be your employees or customers and so on, then you will need to comply with UK GDPR and the DPA 2018 too. Areas to think about will be where and how you're processing personal data, what implications this would have on your data privacy policies, what information is needed to be given to employees and customers about the processing of their personal data, then also what employment contractual clause changes need to take place. But of course, the bigger issue is the right to work. So for employees to work in the UK, they need to have the right to work in the UK. But of course, after 31st of December, the EU nationals will no longer have the automatic right to work in the UK. For EU nationals already physically in the UK by the 31st of December, then there will be 2 options which they may apply for now to allow them to continue to live and work in the UK. And those 2 options are pre-settled status and settled status. In summary, pre-settled status is for EU citizens who have at least 5 years of continuous residence in the UK, whereas settled status is for EU citizens who have at least 5 years of continuous residence in the UK. So I won't go into the details of the rules on these 2 options now, as I'm conscious of time. However, do be aware that applications can be made via smart and Android phone, where ID documents will be required and also proof of residency. And there are a list of documents which the Home Office will accept, which can even include travel tickets for arrival in the UK. So for EU nationals who are not physically present in the UK before the 31st of December, then they may not use either of the settlement schemes. The rules are that except for Irish citizens, EU citizens moving to the UK from 1st of January onwards will face the same immigration restrictions that apply already to citizens from other non-European countries around the world. For business travel trips, if a visitor does not have a business visa, then permitted business activities will be restricted to activities such as business meetings, scoping out projects for projects to be performed overseas, and attending conferences and so on. They won't be able to carry out paid work as such, which would include things like work placements or internships or in temporary gap in UK headcount, even for short periods of time. There will be business visas in existence. However, this will be negotiated between the UK and each EU country, and it would be granted on a case-by-case basis. So absolutely, as a word of warning, visitors should expect tougher checks at border controls from the 1st of January. I did mention secondments earlier, but some companies will choose to bring employees from an overseas company to the UK on a temporary basis to work. This can often help in the early setup days with training and so on and so forth. There can be taxation benefits to this arrangement for the employee to come to the UK under this arrangement. However, they too, as well as any brand new hires that you may make to the company, will still be impacted by the loss of freedom of movement. And usually secondments will be around a 6-month period to maybe 2 years, and they would not be covered by any business visa agreement. So if we think about non-UK hires, which includes secondments, then the UK are introducing a points-based immigration system. So anyone coming to the UK must meet a specific set of requirements for which they will score points, and then visas are then allocated to those who have sufficient points. So points will be awarded for things such as salary, occupation, whether this is on the skills shortage list, qualifications and so on. And there will be various categories of sponsorship license available depending on your hiring needs. So for hiring in the UK, I would summarise that you need to bear in mind that the application process for the sponsorship license approval is lengthy, it can be costly, and also you will need a senior person in the UK and a UK company or branch in order to apply for the sponsorship license to begin with. There will continue to be no dedicated visa route for low-skilled workers, so you're really going to need to think about what roles you will need to hire into to identify that if a sponsorship license is a viable option or not. And if it's not, then how you're going to attract your talent from the local resident labour market force. This is where your employer brand and employment offering are really going to make a difference to give you that competitive edge. Also, you should maybe be looking at your current organisational structure to identify if it's maybe a good idea to bring some EU nationals to the UK prior to the 31st of December so that they can utilise the settlement scheme. And then finally, review and update your recruitment budgets to incorporate potential sponsorship costs. Also looking at your hiring timelines, because you might need some flexibility here. So thank you for that, and I will hand back to Kevin.
Thanks, Jackie. Some great overview there, some good tips for people. I'm now going to hand over to Owen, and I know that I'm looking forward to very much to hearing his and the Pleo story. So over to you, Owen.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Jackie, and good morning or good afternoon to everyone for joining. My name is Owen O'Lehan. That's a very non-phonetic Irish name you might see in front of you. And as mentioned, I'm a sales director here at Pleo, and really excited to share a little about our journey into the UK, lessons along the way, and hopefully it'll spark some considerations for your own journey, whether you're already embarked or thinking about it. Before Pleo, I worked in Dropbox in the UK market, so I've been selling into that market for quite a while now. So if I just share my screen, as mentioned, I'm from Pleo. We were very humbled to win the Nordic Start-ups last year. And for those who don't know, we are a fintech solution. We automate expense management. And Kevin, you're a CFO. I'm sure you understand the pain of reconciliation and a non-digital expense process. So that's what we do, and so far it's going well. We're a Danish company. We were founded in 2015, launched into the UK quite early, relatively early on our journey, and at this point we have 2 funding rounds. We are about 200 people internationally across 6 markets. We can't hire fast enough right now, and you can see our kind of representation, but ultimately the UK is a really significant part of our story, and really as to why we made such an early decision to go there. You know, in any market sizing evaluation, when you're looking at hypotheses and, you know, market share that you could possibly win, when we did this for the UK, it was just significant in compared to any other market, and that's of course due to the size and scale and scope of the market. In one instance, you know, the construction industry in the UK had more companies than in our ideal company spot in a whole other market. So that gives you a sense of the opportunity that exists there. And so really it's a no-brainer, whether you're in B2B, B2C, you know, we're lucky to be industry agnostic, but when you do those hypotheses and you run the numbers, you know, the UK is substantial compared to the Nordic market. As well, in my previous role in Dropbox, the UK was globally the second largest market for us outside of the US as well. So just from a financial and opportunity perspective, it's sort of the elephant in the room. And so I'd just like to talk now about what our route to entry was along that journey. And so it started off with some rather cheap back and forth flights. Ryanair, I think, is 200 kroner from Denmark, Copenhagen to Stansted, and we just had a group to go back and forth pretty much every week. And so they fly in Monday morning, land in at 10 a.m., do 12 meetings over 3 or 4 days, stay in an Airbnb, and really just sort of start interviewing and learning about the market. In terms of the lessons at this stage, really the profiles that were sent were very much builders, not operators. So they were very energetic, very kind of, you know, generally talented people, and passionate about the market. So you want to sense scrappy profiles who can pivot and learn and build. Ultimately, a piece that really helped with that earlier on was our CEO Jeppe, crystally clearly explaining the why we were joining or going to the UK, and instilling in those people like a sense of the opportunity that existed, and really rallying behind the UK. I think that's what almost pretty much funded and motivated 6 months of really tiring work of going back and forth. And so that instilled a lot of energy and passion. Another learning at this point was around not worrying about building for scale or ROI on visits. We would go over and meet with 5-person companies. We would do a rollout for a 10-person company. We would physically bring the credit cards to offices by bike. And so these things don't make sense in a normal business, right? If you're executing, you don't fly over for a small opportunity. But the very start, you don't have to worry about that. And so what we did was really got to know our customers well and gave an excellent customer experience, which led to reviews online and comparison sites, and that snowballed. And now that just does so much work for us in our sales motions. So I think at the start, not worrying about direct ROI or building to scale is okay. Another piece, and I think Kim mentioned this maybe before we went online, is leveraging the Scandi brand. So in the UK, people look to the Nordics as this utopian, futuristic society, which is a great connotation to have, and really you can leverage that. And it really denotes excellent design and good quality. And so you can imbue that in your messaging and almost fear of missing out in selling it. So it's not to be ignored. And finally, we were sort of a new category of solutions. So strategic positioning was super important. We had, to save ourselves effort, we would compare ourselves to existing but non-direct competitors. So we are like a Monzo, but in expense management, which is a fintech, or we have a direct integration with the leading accountancy product on the market. And that did a huge amount of work for us. So if there are strategic positionings you can do, leverage that as much as possible. But flying back and forth Monday mornings is not sustainable, is not a plan for very long. I think we did that for six months or so. And then ultimately you need boots on the ground. Kevin, like you said, you need that local knowledge, whether you're planning marketing initiatives or speaking to customers or building out a team. And so in 2018, we had a co-working space and built out we started to scale at that point. We brought in a VP of sales, a key role for the company who was based there. We added channels like outbound partners, brought in CX. And in this time, I think there's a few lessons around hiring and the profiles and what's important there. I think, it's very easy to hire. Everyone speaks English in the Nordics, and you can get someone that has Danglish. But you need a cultural fluency if you really want to penetrate a market and go head to head with other competitors. Like the simplest thing of an inbound lead coming to you, and that could be an incredible company, but if you don't know the landscape, you would just completely miss that. And we had a few native UK people at that time, and many examples where a lead would come in, it's an incredible company, and someone would spot it out, and then we could prepare for it. And if you don't have that, in those moments, or multiply that by 100, you can miss out on small percentages. The next thing on scaling in a new market, and I guess it goes for any market, is the hiring profile. I think, when you're in a new market, there's a bit of chaos. There's not much structures. You don't have enablement resources or necessarily processes or protocol. So you need to hire people that are okay with chaos. And you need to be honest with them that chaos is what their job will entail. So building that into your hiring profile, again, if you're just hiring operators who, are coming in, expect to plug and play in a new market, it's going to crash and burn. There's so many pivots you will need to make. Your messaging, which works very well in the Nordics, doesn't shine. One of our biggest messaging points is around trust, transparency, and non-hierarchical companies. We want to empower people. And that works well for us in the Nordic space, but people are a little bit more cynical in the UK. And so we pivot more to control around spending here. And you want the people that can pivot. Finally, before you scale, it's critical to understand the levers of what's going to empower your scaling. Have you just got easy wins? And, will you make a mistake bringing in 10 people? Or do you fundamentally understand what the revenue drivers of what will enable you to scale? And it's so critical to do that. If you see early results and you scale them, but it isn't linked to what can really drive growth, you've wasted a lot of money. And this happened in Dropbox. We went into enterprise UK before the product was ready and wasted millions on enterprise salaries. So don't get burned. Finally, here we are today. We've got our own office in Shoreditch, where I'm sitting right now. We're at 30 people. We are the largest market by revenue for Pleo as a company. And where we are now is we have regional ownership, which is super important. Someone has to wear the hat with a UK number on it. That can't be a shared goal or initiative. It won't get done. And another lesson for us is around retaining culture. I think you want to have some originals in a new market. You can, otherwise that organic culture that you've, carefully crafted and treasure might not spread. So cross-pollinate your offices, bring over originals, send the UK people to your HQ early and often. We do 2 weeks of onboarding in our HQ. I think that's super critical. So as I said, where we are now, the UK is our most productive market. It's growing incredibly well and consistently. We've grown to 4,000 customers here, and we're building out some key roles for the company to be based here, so to become a regional hub. So VPs and directors and all those nice roles, and even leading our product efforts, where we are pioneering new releases to the UK market. I wanted to touch on COVID very quickly there. I think that came up. It's tough right? It's tough anywhere, but we believe the scale that underpins the market scope remains. So, oh, a little error with the slide there around our lessons. Try reloading, never mind, that happens. That was a summary of all the lessons I talked about, but never mind. Finally, considerations for you in expanding to the UK. Product market, this comes first, right? This is first and foremost. And hopefully there aren't too many regulatory or legal barriers to entry, in which case then your product market generally would be fairly similar. Certainly for us, that has been the case. But there are cultural nuances that you will figure out. You know, say for the UK, mileage is much more important as an expense than it is in Nordic countries. So you'll figure that as they go along. Integrating with the leading software of the market is going to be super helpful for you. Deciding on your structure, whether that's centralized, decentralized, what sort of go-to-market you'll have. Are you a challenger in the market or competitive? What channel sales motion? Localization, you know, you have a few seconds when people go to your website, and you know, it sounds so obvious, but if the cosmetic localization isn't there, if people don't sense that you're local to that market, your conversion just plummets on, you know, what your sales funnel is there. So landing those case studies, giving the product away for free early on, and designing that page to convert to the maximum is super important. And as I said, all along, the profiles at first, the builders, the pivoters, they're going to lose interest after a year, but you always want to mix a little bit of that and the people who are culturally fluent in the market. And then finally retain culture by keeping those originals there. So hopefully that is relevant to some of your own journeys, but that was certainly ours. So delighted to share that today. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Owen. Lots and lots of really great points there, and good to hear the story. I think for me, 3, maybe not the highest level ones, really stuck out. One was okay with chaos. Yeah, absolutely get that. That makes sense. The second one was how important it is to get those first sales, even if you feel you've got a huge amount of resource, winning relatively small sales. That traction is so important. And finally, the cross-pollination culture points is something we say to people a lot. That is also very, very important. So thanks very much for that. I hope people found that useful. We do have 10 minutes or so for some questions. So in fact, the first one I think is about talent. So the first one is, what's the biggest challenge to Nordic business? Okay, no, I've pre-answered it in my head. I think personally it's about talent, attracting and retaining, but I'm going to throw that to Owen, having just explained his story. How do you guys attract and retain talent?
Yeah, I mean, that's, as you say, just a pivotal foundation to have. So I throw that alongside the product market fit, right? That's just at the kernel of everything else. And if you go in before product market fit, you have just wasted a lot of time and money. So once that's involved, I think there's a few ways. I think an easy plug and play way is just partnering with an agency. If you don't have the resources for in-house recruitment, there are excellent agencies in the UK, or2, or is one that comes to mind, and they've super cheap models now where they don't do as high a percentage fee, but they're just on retainer. So I think that's probably my advice for getting it. But yeah, as I say, the profiles you want are that T shape. They're deep on a few issues, but they can move from marketing to sales to operations every few moments.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Some other questions then. So we have a question about bank account opening. apparently it's, well, not apparently, I know this, it seems currently impossible to open a bank account. Which banks currently accept new customers? Yeah, I'm not going to hide on this one. It is hard. What's the answer to that? Well, it depends. It depends what sector you're in. It depends how big you are or think you might become. My recommendation would be, and maybe you've done this already, leverage off any existing relationships you've got wherever you're based in your home country. Maybe through that they can facilitate a bank account opening in the UK. If not, and we're connected to a lot of banks and it is hard, try perhaps some of the challenger banks. They're taking on more business now. They may not be as fully functioning in some ways as a traditional bank, but they absolutely can give you a transactional bank account which allows the business to operate, you know, pay, receive, and so on. That'll be my recommendation on that one. Owen was nodding there, so maybe he wants to add something to that. Or
I think just being in the fintech space, there's so many challenger banks, as you say, that give you that ease of entry and startup. That I think that's smart.
And there's more coming along in that space outside the traditional banking. Another question: can you set up in the UK without travelling due to the pandemic? I'll say something first. Maybe Jackie wants to say something too. I think you can go through the process, the admin processes, the legal process of setting up, yes, without people moving there. However, in terms of what that means downstream around successive operations, I think I've certainly said it. I think Owen said it too. Ultimately, having feet on the ground in the UK and therefore going through that employment piece is really important. So I think you can get across that. Anything from you, Jackie, on that point?
Yeah, I mean, the only aspect really would be around the immigration aspect is going to be the only tricky thing. I mean, if you still have your entity overseas, then you can still hire from an overseas and so on and so forth. It's just when it comes to physically bringing individuals to the UK that are already here that you may run into some roadblocks if you don't have a presence.
Yeah, so you can hire UK people and do it, but the local knowledge bit is important, but also the cross-pollination bit. I think that's a really good point that Owen made about travelling to and fro. That's massive, I think, when a Nordic business moves to the UK. Let me see what else we've got. Okay, what has been your biggest failure so far, and what did you learn from that? How did you take that failure into a learning? I'm not sure who that's to. Is that from, that might be from Owen again, given he's just given his story. So biggest failure, can you see that on the Q&A too? Biggest failure so far, and what did you learn from that? If there's one thing to highlight.
Yeah, I think it goes back to hiring, and when we kind of turned into hyperscale mode in the middle of our journey for the UK. And we hired a lot of people and young people, and naturally as a startup and scale up, we didn't have the infrastructure or the knowledge or resources to give them all the resources they needed, and I think it was a sink or swim situation for some people, and that always hits you when you see people struggling, but you're trying to build, and the lesson was around, you know, not hiring people completely fresh out of college, say for a sales role, when we don't have the infrastructure. That caused a huge operational drag on us, actually, and it wasn't fair to the people. So I would just sort of, the learning there is, when you're scaling and hyperscaling, know the profile that will match the current resources that you have.
Yeah, okay. Another one for you, Owen. I'd be very curious to hear you elaborate a little bit on the pros and cons of having a physical presence in the UK. I'm from a Swedish fintech startup, still on the fence as to whether a physical UK expansion would be worth it. 6 months back, we're working with a large UK client, have done everything so far remotely from Sweden.
Yeah, well, I don't want to give a sort of hard and fast rules here. Obviously, it's what suits you. Pros and cons. So Pros are being able to hire people pretty easier in terms of as I said, the culturally fluent people. You need that. You need that in a customer-facing role. You will just lose out against the competition if you can't pick up on cultural nuances or EQ or market knowledge in the long run. So it's easier to hire those people and build. I think for other markets, you know, you might not want to invest in infrastructure. For us, the UK is going to become a regional hub, so we don't mind that investment. I think the cons then kind of stretch you a little bit about the question on do you structure your org centrally or decentrally? Like, you can do inside sales from the HQ, right? I think that's fair. So going into the regional all-in kind of it forces you to make decisions around structure early on, which might not be the right one. So I think that's a con. I think it depends on the situation, but for the UK, it's such a big market that having the rewards of having local sales and marketing and CX are commensurate with the opportunity. So that was what helped us.
Okay, great. Yeah, so again, in a sense, it depends on exactly what you're doing. You can go so far remotely, but at some point you're going to have to make the leap to be successful in the longer term, probably. There are no more questions. We do have a minute or two left if anybody wants to ask.
I think there is a question, Kevin. There was someone using self-employed people.
Okay.
My answer to that would be, as a sponsor, you need to have a contract between yourself as the sponsor and the migrant. And there is an obligation for you as a sponsor to be responsible for that migrant in the UK. And if that migrant then leaves, then they will then lose their right to work and visa status in the UK. So all of those things are going to present a challenge. Also, the fact that if you have them on a sponsorship license in the long run, then that in itself is going to challenge the concept of them actually being a self-employed worker in the UK. So that's going to cause you more issues when it comes to IR35, which is a very UK specific thing. And it's also very expensive. So there's a lot of fees attached to sponsoring someone in the UK. So maybe whether you want to invest that time and money on someone who's self-employed is something that's going to be a very business specific question, but it's also going to maybe pose more challenges for you in the long run.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. Another one actually related to travel and visas for you, Jackie. So if I read the question through, we work the UK market from Sweden and have done for many years and have a satellite office in London. We have customers in the UK for many years, working through partners, but also direct to end customers. Do our personnel need work visas to travel and work and do business in the UK from 2021?
Unmute myself, sorry. So yes, okay. So from what I understand from this question, you have customers in the UK, but you have, if you have someone that is working and living outside of the UK who doesn't have a settlement status or pre-settled status or a UK passport, if they're going to be doing anything that constitutes work in the UK, that's not just attending conferences, then they will need to have a business visa at least, or you will need to sponsor them, and that's the general blanket rule for everyone.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. How important would it be to have a culturally sensitive person on board when doing SaaS B2C? Interesting. That is a hard question to answer, as the questioner has actually posed in the question. How important culturally sensitive? I think it depends what you mean by culturally sensitive, how extreme you mean that to be. I think in all cases it's important for somebody who has that wider cultural understanding to bridge Nordic and UK. The degree of that may vary depending on role, type of business, but I think in all cases that really, really is important, and we see it all the time. That would be my response. Cool. Owen's nodding, so I think he agrees with that. Final question. Will the UK use/accept CE marking after Brexit? How are the legal thoughts/laws for the future of reg product guarantees? I have to say, being honest, I'm not quite sure what that means. Maybe that's an area which is outside of, well, certainly outside of my knowledge. Are you able to elaborate in the Q&A box? Or is it an obvious question and I just don't know the answer? I don't know if any of you guys have a response at any level on that one. No? Okay, we'll see if we can follow up on that afterwards. I'll try and understand what that means, but thanks for the question anyway. I'm very conscious of time. We're over our hour now. It's 2 minutes past 11, so I think time to depart. Thanks very much to everybody for listening. Thanks to Kim for the introduction. Thanks very much to Owen for your story. That was really interesting, and thanks to you, Jackie. So thanks a lot to everybody, and goodbye. Have a good day.